If you're not going to stay to the very end of this story, don't bother starting it. Because whatever you think it is, it's not. And when you do stay to the end and figure out it was something completely different, I need you guys to comment below. What was that? On the night of January 31st, 1910, an American couple living in London, Dr. Harvey Crippen and his wife Belle, were hosting a small dinner party for two of their friends and playing cards, when all of a sudden, Belle, his wife, would put down the cards and get up to say one of her stories. Dr. Harvey knew his wife was so annoying and always had to be the center of attention, so they started talking in hands. He would tell his wife, and she would simply reply back. So Harvey said, "Oh no, just let her do what she has to do. It's no way I could talk any sense to that woman." You see, Dr. Harvey was a puny man, puny. He worked at a dentist's office mixing medicine for the other doctor. Belle was a beautiful woman. She was an inspiring actress, and her job was not easy, folks. Her job was basically to spend Harvey's money on her expensive wardrobes and lifestyle. You see, she never really respected Harvey. He was a puny man, inside and out. Belle would stop telling the story and actually performing the story, and Paul and Clara, the dinner guests, they just loved it. Why did they love it? Because they were theater people too. They were just like Belle. And when her performance ended, they were so happy, they started clapping. Yeah, 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 good job, good job. And Dr. Harvey, he was just thankful. It was over with. Dr. Harvey would get up and grab the cards because he really wanted to play this special cards game that night. But his wife's performance had taken up the whole night that his guests had to be leaving. He was upset and he put down the cards. But that is exactly what you expect from a puny man. Folks, there's a huge difference between being puny and being polite and respectful. I'm polite and respectful, but I never, ever let people walk all over me. Dr. Harvey wasn't polite, he was just disgusting. A puny man. Belle would tell Harvey, "Harvey, go get a horse and carriage for our guests to go home." And he would reply, "All right, hon, no problem." And as Harvey was stepping out to get a horse and carriage, Belle would tell him, "Harvey, get a nice one, don't get a cheap beat up one." And he would reply, "All right, hon, no problem." And he would step out and he kept on looking for a nice one, but he just couldn't find a nice one. An hour would pass and he just figured, let me just get what I find. He knew Belle wouldn't like it. But actually, when he brought it to the guests, they loved it and they took it and were ready to go home, and Belle would just turn around and walk inside. And Harvey knew he was toast. As soon as Harvey entered the house, Belle just went off. She truly loved fighting. It was her passion. Some people are like that. They love fighting. They fight over anything, small issues, large issues. Any fight they could get their hands on, they'll take it. And Belle just went off. "Why did you get that carriage? And why didn't you clap hard enough when my performance ended? Why were you clapping like this? Why can't you clap like a man?" Dr. Harvey just stayed quiet with his head down because he really didn't like fighting with her. So she would go to the mantel and grab this picture that she had framed of a prize fighter, her ex-lover, that she openly had an affair with, that Dr. Harvey knew all about, and she would grab the frame and say, "Harvey, I could get any man I want." This would not affect Harvey a bit because he was used to his wife abusing him. But then she realized that he wasn't getting upset, so she said, "Harvey, I'm leaving you tomorrow." That actually made him really happy, for a minute at least, because he really wanted to divorce his wife. He was just worried about the scandal. But then he felt sad again because he knew his wife was a big BSer and she wasn't going nowhere. He was only worried about one thing. How am I going to get some sleep tonight? This woman is not going to stop speaking all night long. So he had to come up with an idea. Then it hit him. An idea. He said, I'm going to treat this woman like a 5-year-old. You know when you have a 5-year-old crying and you tell him, hey, you want some candy? You want some candy? So as she was yelling, he would say, Belle, want some whiskey? And she would stop yelling and say, yes. And his idea worked. Treat her like a 5-year-old, even though she was a grown woman. Dr. Harvey would go make 2 drinks, one for himself and hand one over to Belle. 2 days later, the charity, the Music Hall Ladies Guild, that Clara and Belle were part of, were waiting to have a meeting, but Belle didn't show up, and she was their treasurer. They would ask, did anyone see Belle? And they would all say no. They said, maybe she's just running late. As they all were waiting for Belle, a knock on the door would come. Knock, knock, knock. So a woman would get up and go answer it. It wasn't Belle. It was Ethel, Dr. Harvey's assistant, and she had a letter and a package. And she said, this is for you guys. She gave it to the woman and she left. The woman would take the letter and the package inside, open the letter. It was written by Harvey and said, sorry guys, my wife has a relative in the United States that has fallen ill, and she had to go to America to take care of him. She won't be back for a couple of months. And when they opened the package had the checkbook and the ledger. This basically meant, guys, go find yourself a different treasurer. My wife is not going to be around. Everyone found this very strange and odd, the way Belle just left like that without telling anyone. But they all said to themselves, maybe it was a true emergency and she had to leave that way. So they would hire a temporary treasurer until Belle returns. About 3 weeks later, Clara and the Ladies Guild would host their annual ball, and they would send an invitation to Belle and her husband to come. They knew Belle was in the United States, that she wasn't coming, but they still sent it out of respect. But her husband did come, and with a date in his arms, it was Ethel, his assistant. Clara and everyone was in shock. No one believed how Dr. Harvey would openly cheat on his wife like that in a public place in front of everyone. So the Ladies Guild said, we're not going to invite this guy to our future events until we have a chance to speak to Belle. But Belle would never return. 2 months later, on March 20th, 1910, Dr. Harvey would come out and say, I just got word while my wife was in America, she had fallen ill and passed away. Everyone was like, what? That just can't be right. And everyone became suspicious of him, that he had something to do with his wife's disappearance. So members of the Ladies Guild would go to the police station and report Belle missing and tell the police, we believe her husband may have had something to do with her disappearance. And the police would ask, why do you believe that? And they would simply say, the man was openly cheating on her, and then she just disappeared. The police told them, that doesn't mean he killed her, and really didn't want to take the case. But they kept on pressuring the police. And after 3 months, the police would assign Walter Dew, a famous detective for over 20 years, that worked on Jack the Ripper, and was one of the people that found the last body to the case. So on July 6, 1910, Inspector Dew would go to Dr. Harvey's house and ask him, so what's the word on your wife, man? What's the story? He expected him to tell him the same exact story that he has been hearing, that his wife went to America, became sick, and passed away. But Dr. Harvey would tell Mountain Dew, Inspector Dew, a completely different story. Dr. Harvey would tell Inspector Dew, my wife's not dead. Inspector Dew would say, what? Why did you make up that story for? Dr. Harvey would reply, to avoid any scandal. You see, we had this dinner party for Paul and Clara, and after the party we had this fight, and Belle threatened to leave me the next day. And when the next day came and when I woke up that morning, I couldn't find her. So I told myself, wow, she really made good on her threat this time. Believe it or not, Inspector Do actually believed Dr. Harvey. He just couldn't believe a man like Dr. Harvey could kill Belle. He was puny. So Inspector Do would ask Dr. Harvey, why did you cheat on your wife for that? Dr. Harvey said, I never cheated on my wife. I only started dating Ethel when I knew my wife was not returning. Besides, me and Ethel been in love for a very long time. Inspector Do would tell Dr. Harvey, in order for me to close this case, I need to speak to Belle. Dr. Harvey understood, and Inspector Do would leave and go put an ad in an American newspaper saying, Belle, if you see this, you need to contact the London police station. We're looking for you. And 5 days later, Inspector Do would return to Dr. Harvey's house for a follow-up. But Dr. Harvey and Ethel completely vanished. They were nowhere to be found. And Inspector Do couldn't believe anything less than these people were running away from something. Inspector Do was just furious. He did an all-out manhunt for Dr. Harvey and Ethel, and he brought his team to fully search the house. They were throwing things around and searching everywhere, but they couldn't find anything. And Inspector Do went down to the basement, and he looked at the fireplace. There were bricks there that kind of looked off, so he would grab a poker and go boom, boom, boom. It was solid underneath, means it's okay. But in the center, he would go like, he knew something was under there. Inspector Do would call his team over, guys, I need you. And they would come and start removing the bricks. When they removed all the bricks, they would find this clay area with soft clay on it. So Inspector Do would say, hand me that shovel. He would take the shovel, and as soon as he dug, this powerful smell would hit the area. Everyone started throwing up, and they knew they hit the jackpot. The inspectors would find human organs, just organs, no head, no arms, nothing like that. And they would find Dr. Harvey's pajamas, and they would also find a big piece of skin with a birthmark on it that matched Belle's birthmark. They were not sure whose body parts these were, but they would put it down as Belle's. Shortly after this discovery, Dr. Harvey and Ethel were found on a boat trying to flee the country that way. They were arrested and charged, and Dr. Harvey would be found guilty of his wife's murder and executed, and Ethel would be acquitted from all charges. This case was officially closed in 1910, but it was so bizarre and confusing that after 100 years later, in 2010, a forensic scientist from Michigan State University would get a piece of tissue of the body parts that were found in Dr. Harvey's basement that was held in one of London's museums and conduct a DNA test with one of Belle's grandnieces. And guess what, folks? It was no match. A matter of fact, it wasn't even a female's body. It was a male's body. And all we could say is, probably Dr. Harvey was innocent and executed wrongly. Please, people, comment below your opinion on this story. I'm Ahmed Bassioni, and I wanted to thank you guys for watching today's video. God bless you. I owe you guys one. Please like, share, and subscribe. I'm out of this joint.